Everyone has their own take on a biscuit, and this is my take, and this take is a delicious one. I'm going to date myself with this one and say that Everquest was my very first MMORPG back in like the 8th grade, and I relied on these stupid biscuits you started out with to survive. And to make these honey biscuits is pretty straightforward. You're going to need 110 grams worth of cold butter, 280 milliliters worth of buttermilk, 200 grams worth of all-purpose flour, 110 grams worth of whole wheat flour, 4 grams worth of salt, and 20 grams worth of baking powder. Yes, 20 grams worth of baking powder. I'm also going to be using just a touch of vinegar to make my own buttermilk. Since I don't typically keep buttermilk in the fridge, and I do keep half and half for milk, I can use around 15 milliliters worth of vinegar for every 250 milliliters worth of milk. This needs to hang out for around 10 or 15 minutes while we get everything else ready. For your butter, you are going to need the entire stick of butter or 110 grams worth. And the easiest way to do this is make sure that you do cube this up and then keep it super cold. The reason why we want to keep it cold is so that way when we put it in the food processor later, it doesn't just turn into a dough rather than this crumbly biscuit texture we're looking for. And after pleasing the sous chef Gandalf, who approves of the butter, continue to dice this until you get all of it into cubes. Once you've cut up your entire stick of butter, place this into your bowl, throw this into the fridge to keep it super cold while you're dealing with everything else. That's super important. Now I am using a food processor for this, but you can break this down by hand. Instead, for the food processor, add in all of your dry ingredients first. So this is going to be your 200 grams worth of all-purpose flour, followed by your 110 grams worth of whole wheat flour, then your baking powder and your salt. The reason why I like to add in all of my dry ingredients first is so that way I can make sure that all of them are sifted together and I don't have to worry about weird pockets of dry ingredients later. This only needs around 20 or 30 seconds to mix, and then you can add in all of your cold butter directly out of the refrigerator. Now this does need to just pulse for around 10 to 15 seconds at a time. Don't let this go for too long, otherwise you're going to risk turning this into a mushy mess, which is not what you want for biscuits. Continue to pulse this in 10 to 15 second increments until you get this really fine, almost sand looking texture of your butter and your flours. This is the texture that you're looking for when you're making biscuits, so this way you have little pockets of butter throughout the dough. Now remove your flour and your butter and all of your dry ingredients from that mixer, place this into a rather large bowl and just sift it around. You can see what this actually looks like in its final form. This is where we're going to start adding in our buttermilk. You're only going to add in 250 milliliters worth of your buttermilk, reserving around 30 milliliters for later. I'm also adding in around 15 to 20 milliliters worth of maple syrup. You can also use honey if you don't have maple syrup around, you do you on that one. Since I'm not trying to form a tremendous amount of gluten, I am just using my spatula to essentially fold all of the ingredients together. And since I am using all-purpose flour and whole wheat flour, I did notice that my dough was a bit dry, so I hit it with just a touch more buttermilk to help hydrate everything. This is going to be totally personal preference, and if you're using just all-purpose flour, you may not need to do this. Now, once you have everything into that shaggy mess, place this onto a floured surface, and we are going to introduce some folds into our dough. This isn't super necessary, but I do feel like it gives it a nice structure when you fold your biscuit dough. Press this out into around a 1-inch rectangle. This is going to allow you to get a nice even fold on this biscuit dough. Spend as little time as possible doing this part of it, so that way you don't have a chance of melting any of that butter. Once you have your nice 1-inch rectangle, bring in each side towards the middle of your dough. This doesn't have to be precise, but try to make it as even as possible. Once you have the dough nicely folded, this is when we're going to start pressing it one more time. Press this back into that 1-inch thick rectangle, so this way we can do another fold. Remember, the more even it is, the better the folds are going to be, and the better the layers are going to be. Once you have it at that 1 inch, bring the sides back in towards the middle, creating a nice thick boy of a dough. Give this another press into that 1 inch of thickness, and then we're going to give it the final fold. Make sure you are very generous with the flour on your working surface, so this way it doesn't stick it all to your cutting board. This dough can become very tacky, so just keep that in mind while you're working with it. Press this into that 1 inch of thickness one last time, and try to shape it as best as you can into a rectangle so you get nice even pieces. Since I like to make square biscuits so I don't lose any of my dough, I'm making this into a rectangle first, and then I'm going to cut it from here. You can just use a circle cutter if you really want to, but I like the square biscuits better. Once you have your nice puck of dough, you should be able to see these little bits of butter all the way throughout, and that's really what you're looking for with your dough. To further even out my dough, I used a bench scraper and gently pressed on each side to make sure it was as even as possible. Then I actually used the bench scraper to cut my dough into the squares that I needed. Remember, when cutting biscuit dough, you don't want to drag your cutting utensil. The reason for this is that if you do drag the cutting utensil, you're going to seal off the dough and it's not going to rise properly. Instead, use your cutting utensil to press straight down on the dough and lift straight back up. This is going to give you those really nice edges that you're looking for, and it's going to give a nice puff to the biscuit. To bake these off, I'm just using parchment on sheet tray rather than spraying anything down because there is a good amount of fat in the biscuit dough. Now when you're placing these down, this is a very important step. Make sure that the dough isn't too far separated from each other piece. As you set these down, make sure they are close enough to where when they start baking, they rise together. Use some of your remaining buttermilk to brush over the top of your biscuits, making sure you do coat each and every piece and getting in between each piece as well. This is going to give them a really nice, beautiful bake, and on top of that, they're going to protect the dough as they bake off. Once you have everything placed on your sheet tray, place this in the oven at 425 degrees Fahrenheit for about 15 to 20 minutes. You want to make sure you get some nice color on those biscuits before you pull them out. I like to pull the biscuits out right before they start getting too G-bad because they will carry over once they start cooling down. Now to give it a little extra pizzazz, we are going to use Chef Mike to melt down some butter and then add an equal part of maple syrup. Using a pastry brush, whisk this up just to make sure everything is fully incorporated and then glaze those bad boys. Look at that juice all over those biscuits. That sounds so dirty. Don't let your parents listen. Now alternatively, you can coat these with honey butter, miso butter, really any kind of butter you want. You can take the savory route, the sweet route, whatever you really want to do because the biscuits are yours and you are going to enjoy them in Noctiluous Forest running away from skeletons. These biscuits came out beautifully. The dough is nicely cooked. It has a nice crust on the bottom. The crumb on top is gorgeous. And there they are, the maple butter biscuits from Everquest that everyone took for granted and everyone really did use. There they are, guys, some beautiful kind of whole wheat biscuits from Everquest. Now, this is my own interpretation of it, and I felt like if you were in the world of Everquest, they probably didn't just use all-purpose flour because it probably didn't exist. So I tried to use some whole wheat in this as well, but all-purpose flour biscuits are really nice because they become very airy, whereas whole wheat can actually make them heavier and more dense, just like you can kind of see here. But we did get some nice separation with that butter. The glaze looks absolutely beautiful on here. I am on a diet, so I'm only going to be able to try a little bit of this, and then I'm probably going to take the rest to Rachel's work. So cheers. I want the crispiest end. Here, I'll do one of these for you. Here, can we do? Did that work? Oh, look at the steam. Yes. That's on the floor. Salud. Oh, how am I supposed to not eat the whole thing? Even with the whole wheat flour in there, it's really airy, it's really light. It could use a pinch more salt, so maybe some finishing salts on the top of it, which is probably what I'm going to do. But the whole wheat give it this like beautiful, robust flavor that you can't get with just all-purpose flour, and I really like the flavor behind the whole wheat. Just like you should like the flavor behind the merch down below where you can pick up, look, brand new shirts. Check out chefpk.com. My name is Chef BK. Get subscribed, and remember, keep playing with your food. Maybe I'll start up Everquest Project 1999. I can't eat that. I don't know why I'm taking it with me. This diet's gonna be really hard.